This episode is brought to you by Stars. Lisa Tadeo's best-selling book is about to become your favorite new show. Based on a true story, the new Stars original series 3 Women stars Shailene Woodley as Gia, a grieving and struggling writer who embarks on a cross-country road trip where she meets 3 women determined to radically change their lives. This one is not to be missed. Watch the season premiere of 3 Women now, only on Stars and the Stars app.
No, but our guest is a beast of her own sorts. We have a guest. She's a New York Times best-selling author of 6 books. She has a master's degree in spiritual formation and leadership. She's married to her husband, John, and together they have 2 children in college and 1 in high school. She has been featured in Today, Parents, Christianity Today, Pathos, a lot of places. She's nationally ranked, and her podcast has a weekly newsletter called Soul Minimalist. Let's do that again. You and I know her by these 4 words: the next right thing.
Oh my gosh.
Freeman.
My sister from another mister.
Hey, y'all.
Hi, Emily. Welcome to Sidetracked.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here.
And you can find the first half of our conversation with Emily over on the Don't Mom Alone podcast and the Mesmerized podcast. And here on Sidetracked, we have the second half. And if you remember, if you've already listened to that first half, Cynthia asked Emily about how she even got into the decision-making, advice, coaching arena. And Emily shared that it was because of her own journey of making a big decision and how she was getting curious about who she was becoming in the decision process. So here is the rest of her answer to that question and the rest of our conversation.
And so that conversation that I entered into that was already happening of decision-making and discernment, continued. And the next right thing was sort of like, what does a simple, soulful practice of making life decisions look like on a day-to-day basis? Mm-hmm. And so I did that for 5 years. And then I did a podcast episode called How to Walk Out of a Room. It was in February of 2022. And after that episode, it's a very short episode, maybe 3 points. Most of my episodes are that way. I started receiving a lot of listener feedback. People telling me this episode, coming back to me months later, telling me this episode has helped me discern a job or a family situation, or whether or not we should send the kids to this place or that, or something really difficult, or choosing between 2 hard things. It gave people language for something that we are all doing all the time. Mm-hmm. But it somehow eased a little bit of the burden to have a way to talk about it. Mm-hmm. And that's when I realized, that episode was, 15 minutes tops. I have so much more to say about it. Yeah. Not only just from my own life experience, but also I just had things I wanted to teach about it, things I wanted to explore more. And, you kind of asked your question, why do you have such a heart for this conversation? And the answer is, first of all, because I have learned to have compassion for myself of when I feel chronically hesitant and decision fatigued, that slowing down and engaging in some of these practices have been so transformative for me. Mm-hmm. But also I have a lot of compassion because I think when we are tasked with having to make a decision of staying in a space, maybe that has been a place we have loved and lived in all our lives, or considering if it's time for me to move on from the space, this could be a place for many of us that was deeply forming and that we deeply loved. Mm-hmm. And it was part of our identity, part of our connection. And here I am questioning it. It could be something that you worked really hard to get into. You might have gone to school for this, and here you are questioning it. And so I really wanted to handle this conversation with care. And I felt like a podcast episode was great, but I needed more time. So that's why I felt like I wanted this to be a book so that it could be talk aboutable, pass onable, and then it would live on people's shelves to return to when, like you said, I needed this a year ago or 2 years ago. I hear that a lot, by the way. But now, maybe you'll need it a year from now, and now you'll have it.
Yeah.
And you got to talk to Hoda about it.
I got to talk to Hoda about it.
That's like a dream.
She's known as the Nestor, but your sis, was she like, woo, woo? Like, y'all have been on this journey a long time. And she had her own book coming out at the same time, but I know she cheerleaded you. She wasn't jealous.
It was so funny. Yeah. So my sister had a book called House Rules that came out on Tuesday.
You need a copy. It's really pretty.
It was a great book. It came out on like a Tuesday. And that Tuesday was the day I flew to New York to record the Today Show. And I was on the Today Show the next morning, that Wednesday. And my sister, she was so excited for me. And she said, you should wear a pin, like a pin on your shirt that says, ask me about house rules. No, you could wear a t-shirt that says house rules. We laughed
just
so
a
hard
black
about
and white ribbon in your hair or something.
It's fine.
On
Oh,
brand.
Hoda, you're curious about this book? Let me tell you.
Let me tell you a little bit about my sister.
I mean,
and don't you think it's funny? Like, it's Michaelin, right? That's how you say it. Michaelin.
Uh-huh.
Emily.
I know. My mom, she's the oldest. And then 3.5 years of my mom having to tell people how to spell Michaelin. And I guess she figured, I'm just going to go easy.
Never mind. Emily.
Never mind.
Yeah, for sure. So let me ask you a question related to that. Like,
wait, is it how to walk out of a room or into a room? You have into a room in here. Is it?
It's how to walk into a room.
Oh,
okay. But the podcast episode was how to walk out.
Because it threw me off. Sorry, I didn't want to question your notes, but when she said out of a room, I'm listening.
Emily, this is like my life over here on Sidetracked. I
want to make sure people Google it right.
I'm getting it right over here, everyone.
Okay, room. But we need to ask that question, why in and out?
Yeah. I was looking at some of the chapters, and I'm going to be honest with you, I'm only like 2.5 chapters in because I just got it, and I really want to read it, and because I love your podcast so much, and I think you have helped me work through decisions just by listening to your podcast. Not to mention your voice is so therapeutic, which I know everybody says. But I'm like, if I ever have an anxious moment, I'm like, just turn on Emily Freeman. She's got the therapeutic voice.
She also needs to start watching this guy.
Oh, the Bob Ross.
Bob Ross, yeah.
Yeah, he'll help me too.
Never watched an episode.
I haven't. It's fine, everyone. But here's the question: is one of your chapter titles I haven't gotten to yet, but it caught my eye, and it said you were talking about. Hold on, I want to use your words right. Endings and closures. And doing that well. And I was thinking about this because if I recall, you've kind of walked through a season pretty recently, probably led this book, but or maybe it was after you wrote it, I don't know, but that where you kind of had some endings and closures in places you wouldn't have expected, maybe even some hard places. And so I'm just curious, will you talk to us about how do, not even necessarily in your story, I don't want to drag out too much of yours if you don't want to talk about it, but how do we know if we're in a space where there might be an ending and closure? And then why is it important that we do it well?
Well, I think how do we know? That is the question, and that's kind of the framework for discernment. Is I offer in the book, which is Pray, Pray, and that is a framework to follow to kind of begin to know. Okay, how do we know? How can we tell? What are some questions I can ask myself if it's time for me to end something? And that's one kind of ending, but there are other kinds of endings that we don't have to discern. There are some that come upon us unbidden and unchosen: firings, deaths, rejections, betrayals. These are endings that we would have wished it would have ended differently or would have gone on forever. And here we are, we still have to navigate the ending. And then there are other endings that aren't necessarily things we had to discern or make a choice about. There's no framework we had to follow, but they were just, it was time. Like it was a retirement, it was a graduation. It's still an ending that needs to be dealt with and marked, but there wasn't a lot of question or nuance around it. Everyone kind of knew. There maybe was a communal celebration or marking. But all of those endings, chosen or discerned, forced or anticipated, they all have one thing in common, and that is we're holding something that has ended. Endings always come. Closure is a luxury. And I would say that this idea that we always get closure is laughable at best, impossible at worst. It just isn't true. And we would love to think that like all of our endings would end like, this May marks the 20th, I think the 20th anniversary of the last episode of Friends.
No, that's literally my brain went to closure. When you said closure, I thought of the episode.
Yeah, well, there is an episode where Rachel talks about closure. That's what you call closure, which is my favorite. But the final episode, we're kind of marking that 20th year. I remember watching that episode, and I had twins. The twins were infant babies. They just turned 20, by the way, but they were babies. And then when Monica and Chandler had twins, it was so exciting because I was like, I'm them, they are me.
Totally.
But that final scene, their apartment's empty.
Oh, yeah.
They all walk out together to go to get coffee. The keys are on the table. And it's like, it's so deeply sad, but also that's kind of what we imagine closure ought to look like in every area of life. And it just rarely does. And so what I have found, though, endings still come. And so what do we do when things end in a way that we didn't want, didn't expect, and wanted to be different.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've found that we may not have gotten the ending that we wanted, but we can learn to bless and accept the ending that we got. And closure doesn't mean that everything is wrapped up. Closure means we are naming and acknowledging that something has ended. And so there are things that we can do to engage that ending, to own that ending as our own ending, as imperfect as it may be. And that's what I hope to help people be able to do with some of these practices.
It's so huge. 'Cause, I mean, I think like grief, we often think is a loss of a person. There's so many griefs people are walking through that they've never acknowledged, one, named it, or like put words around it, like you're saying, like, oh, the reason I'm feeling this feeling that I'm not acknowledging is I had a huge loss. There was a whole community that we used to be a part of at that church, and we're no longer there. There's a whole group of sports. If your kid stops playing a sport, I mean, that's a little ending, but it can be a felt loss of. So I love that what you're saying, and it applies
and you
to
feel
so
silly
many
too. Sometimes in some of those things, you feel silly. Like it wasn't,
like there's a ranking of
like
losses.
end of a season, a sports season. I'm kind of sad. I can't be sad about that because somebody lost their job.
Or your son's arm getting hurt, like he's not playing in the playoffs right now.
Yeah,
there's some feelings around that, even though you can blow them off like they don't matter. If you blow them off, they still are in there. I think you can already tell from our conversation with Emily how well she formulates her words, and we can hear that her words have power, and we know that it matters what words we say to ourselves and the words we put in our minds and our hearts. Wouldn't it be awesome if those words were God's words? God's words when things are hard or feel out of control. God's words that we're ready on the tips of our tongues for loved ones, or in the middle of our day, or in the middle of the dark night, giving us peace and joy and direction. And even for our kids, wouldn't it be great to equip them with that same skill? Well, you might be thinking, I see what you're saying, but I am not good at memorizing scripture. Well, that's why I want to tell you about one of my favorite things, which is Dwell Differently. Started by two sisters, their monthly membership helps you memorize one Bible verse each month. One verse that then becomes two verses, that then becomes three verses, and the next thing you know, you have a whole arsenal of verses stored up in your heart and mind, words that are powerful and transformative. And when you sign up for Dwell Differently, the membership, you get a kit in your mailbox. You can choose either temporary tattoos or stickers. And I'll tell you what, the verse of the month, they work with a designer, and it's such a cool design. And I've worn the tattoos before, and some of my son's friends have been like, I didn't know your mom had a tattoo. And then I get a chance to kind of tell them. They're like, well, what does it stand for? Because it's the first letter of each word in the verse. It's a little pneumatic trick to help you memorize. And so it's a great way to start conversations with whomever who asks about your sticker or your tattoo. You also get a keychain and a print. You could also get a digital kit that becomes your lock screen, coloring sheets, discussion questions, so much more. Sign up for a year-long membership and commit to getting God's truth in you for good. Go to dwelldifferently.com/sidetracked to get started. Use the code SIDETRACKED to get your first month free, plus an additional discount off an annual membership, and start memorizing with us today.
What did you define? What did you say is the definition of closure? Did you give us a little definition there?
Well, I think informally, I would say closure is not that everything ended or turned out the way that you want. It's not kind of tying up all of the loose ends.
Okay, yeah.
It is just acknowledging that something has ended. It's naming the ending.
Yeah.
And sometimes I use the kind of analogy, the picture in my mind is when you have a chain necklace that gets all knotted up in your jewelry box, and you like pull it out and you're like, oh no, this necklace is connected now to two other necklaces and a pair of earrings, and I have to like sit here and unknot it. And sometimes you do, and you feel like you should get a medal for it. And other times you're just like, I just got to be done with this necklace. It's over. And you have to throw it out. I think sometimes the closure that we have to fight for looks like just blessing that knotted up necklace. Like, this is what it is. This is not what it was before, and it's not what it's meant to be, but it is what it is. And so how can I now mark this in a way that is both a gift to me and honoring of what that space was? Because here's the thing about, like, especially those endings, either the forced ones that we didn't want or the ones that we discerned because this place was really hard.
Yeah.
It's much easier to leave when everything's terrible or when we tell ourselves that everything was terrible. It's difficult to name what was both good and beautiful in that room and to kind of, here's the gifts I'm bringing with me of that time or that space. And then here's the things I'm going to leave behind. And sometimes some of the things we have to leave behind are the whole story, are our ability to explain ourselves. There are conversations happening around tables to which you are not invited. And we feel like I can't get closure until I tell the whole story. And I'm here to tell you, you may not get the closure that you want, but you might be able to find the closure that you need.
Yeah.
And it is deeply heartbreaking to reconcile that with your reality that you hoped would be. But it is possible.
And I would
That's
think
so
that
good.
you would be more free. Like I just think of relationships where I can see that it's just tearing them up. And that, like you said, they have to keep telling the story of all the reasons why. And it's like, if you could just settle all of that in your spirit, how much more energy you would have for other things if you're not having to wrestle with it constantly. Like, I can't get the necklace undone. I can't get the necklace undone. It's like, let the necklace go.
Well, and just the two things can exist at once.
Yeah,
Like my
yeah,
friend
yeah,
says
that's
this a
good.
lot. Like two things can exist at one time. And I remember one time I was ending a chapter and it was a very, very harsh, hard ending for me. And I was walking with a friend, literally like exercising. And she's like,
Wow.
let's go back and talk about all the good. You never would have had this chance or this opportunity. And look what they let you do here. And wasn't it cool that this built this skill set and whatever? And I know that seems obvious, but I don't think I had been able to grasp that side because I was so focused on the end. And in my mind, even still, so often for me, closure means complete resolution. And I don't think those two happen. I mean, like you said, it's a luxury if you get both.
It happens sometimes. When it does, that's when we make our toasts and throw our parties.
Yeah.
But it just rarely does. And I'm so glad you mentioned kind of the ending of a sports season or like I have a friend who had a child who was really good in the band, but he was sick, their final band concert for middle school, and so it's like, oh, well, that was my last one. And you can't get that back. There's a grief there. And it is, if you feel silly about the grief, it's easy to kind of like stuff it down, but it's still there. And so naming it is one way of kind of loosening it up and allowing yourself to move forward.
Yeah. No, I think that's going to help a lot of people.
Okay.
We have a couple minutes left with you, and we really want to ask you some super important questions.
By the way, this happens every time. She goes to our last 3 questions, and I still have to ask you one other thing. I'm so sorry. I keep doing this
for you.
I know. I know, and this isn't a fast question, but I just have to ask it because I don't know when we'll talk to you again. But real quick, decision fatigue. Do you find that it gets harder the older you get to make decisions? Like as you're doing this, like, and you're working through decision fatigue, and you're helping people, like,
or like our friends who have the son who's sick, like. Finally, their daughter sent a message. She's like, guys, just bring us food. We have decision fatigue. We're trying to make medical decisions. Like, we will eat whatever food you bring.
Yeah.
We don't have energy to even decide what to eat.
It's seasonal like that.
Okay.
And it can also be seasonal, your own life season, like where you are in age, for example.
For sure.
So yeah, I do think it's all those things. There's so many factors at play.
Yeah. Well, you guys, I'm going to say this and we're going to ask your questions, sidetrack, but you do such a great job helping people with that. And they're so, like, your episodes, I feel like every time I'm like, oh, I needed to hear that.
It's just been fun to watch Emily grow.
Oh my gosh.
From Grace for the Good Girl. Is that our first one?
Yeah, that was the first one.
We wrote it together. Grace for the Good Girl.
That was our first one.
That was our first one. And we needed her. And she was so kind to us. And she's grown up and filled with grace. Okay. But what is she getting sidetracked as well? If there's television on, whatever streaming service you use, what is getting you sidetracked right now? Like, what are you streaming? What are you?
Oh, I already mentioned it. Suits.
This is your show. Have you watched that?
I've watched a few episodes, but I'm going to get back on it.
I haven't watched it at all. So when you made that reference, I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about.
You have to kind of get through the first few episodes because you're like, oh, this is so cheesy. Like, this is really cheesy. But then it gets really good. And then you'll have the theme song in your head forever.
Isn't it drama?
It's very good. It's like drama, but like quippy. It's like attorneys. There are a bunch of attorneys.
Yeah, a bunch of lawyers.
Your kind of show.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no, yeah. Okay,
I'm a Parks and Rec kind of. Okay,
tell us food. Like
food.
What food will get you sidetracked? Like, best intention doesn't matter. You see it, you're gonna eat it.
I I see it, I'm going to eat it. Probably chips and salsa. If I see
Yes.
chips, I mean, I'm going to eat that. I'm not going to
There you
not
are.
eat that.
I cannot.
As you should. There's no decision point in that, by the way. You walk into
Yes.
the room. I'm going to use all your titles. You walk into the room, and that's the next right thing.
That's the next right thing. Listen, in a million little ways. All of my book titles, I feel like I love, I need to just write a poem with like all the book titles.
A
It would be
haiku,
great.
if you will, because you're right.
Oh,
It's-
that's so true. Like string them all together. Yes,
Yes.
100%. Okay. Have you been influenced on the Instagram or otherwise for an Amazon purchase recently? Or maybe you've just like hopped on over and you just saw it in your suggested.
Like, what's your Amazon go-to that you're like, I
Maybe.
ordered it.
Yeah.
Gotta have it.
This
Or
is so
something you
dumb.
found recently that you were like, this was a really good Amazon purchase.
I'm trying to see if it's close by. I just, this is so dumb.
Not dumb.
I just bought some matches on Amazon
Yes, you did.
because, listen, I'm always lighting the candles and I can never find a match or like that little, and
The
that
lighter
thing,
thing.
that
Mhm. Yeah,
thing,
yeah.
it's so ugly. Like
Yeah.
my sister
Give it-
says that if it's sitting, whatever's sitting out is a decoration. And so if I don't have it sitting out though, I can't find it.
Mhm.
And so that chick thing that we use to like light fires
Yep.
or whatever, I don't like those. I like matches. But then I don't want those kitchen matches that you're like, that you get at the grocery store because those are not pretty.
Not beautiful.
So I bought some like matches with the matchbox. I wish I had it with me, but it's in the other room. With like there's some owls on it or like some like white tipped matches that I put in a little
Mhm.
jar. So that's kind of my most recent
We
thing.
love this because people order the darndest things and Amazon has them. Like literally, we
for
talked to
sure.
someone earlier today and hers was all about the workout clothes.
Yeah.
And now we're talking matches and I love it all.
You know what I ordered today? A Renaissance dress for medieval times that I'm going to next week. Yes,
That
I
is everything.
am. Mhm. Yeah. This one.
Well,
No.
Emily P. Freeman, thank you for being here.
Such a delight.
Such a delight. Such a fan. and-
Such good stuff. Like I'm even thinking, about a lot of things. Like I have some endings, I have some graduations, and it might be why I'm questioning my decision.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do a little inner reflection.
Well, you're going to get the
time.
book, everyone. It's How to Walk into a Room. That's our new book. I have it. It's in my palms and I'm just like barely reading a page a day so I can like savor it.
You're
But
gonna savor.
podcast.
Did you do an audiobook?
I did.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, then I
Yeah.
need that too because
This
of your
is right.
voice.
You can listen to that.
Anything else you want to point us to, Emily?
I think you covered it. Yep. That's great. The book is a great place to send them.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being on
Thank you,
Sidetracked.
Emily.
Thank
Okay, stick
you.
around.
I just had the biggest girl crush ever.
Really?
Yeah. Because I listened to her stuff and I think maybe because I got into her stuff probably later than most people, but I really was in and
Oh.
out of decision making. And I felt so heard and seen by the fact that she was like, yeah, this can be hard. Here's the system.
I think a blogging conference. I was pregnant with Knox. So 2011,
Mm-hmm.
we hung out and then just paths have crossed. She has the same publisher I do. So we got to go on a retreat and truly people have been like, are you and Emily sisters? I think I look more like her than her actual sister, Nestor. And I think she's an Enneagram 4. I know we don't talk about Enneagram.
No.
So I connect with all of her talking. I love that she asked you those pointed questions about silence.
Well, I did
love
too.
that.
That
It was
was
like a little therapy session I got to watch.
awkward for everybody.
No, they all loved it. Y'all loved it. I know you did.
Here's what we're gonna do.
What?
In honor of Emily Freeman, we're gonna leave this episode with 10 seconds of silence. Bye.
Thanks for tracking with us and following us, whether you came from Don't Mom Alone or from Mesmerized, or maybe you already were following us from our last episode. Thank you for doing that. If you're not following whatever podcast player you have, make sure you click the whatever button that podcast player has to make sure new episodes pop into your library. I will let you know that our next new episode is going to come out October 4th, and you're not going to want to miss it. If you're following, it will just show up. We are going to do a bi-monthly show, and we are thrilled to have this new home for us to continue to grow and to connect with you and shine a light of levity and joy. We made it into the top 100 of all comedy shows, y'all. Thanks to you. So leave a review if you are loving it. We love seeing your encouraging words. All right. Thanks for tracking with us. Bye.
Greetings and God bless. This is Tyler Burns.
And this is Dr. Jamar Tisby.
And we want to invite you to check out our podcast, Pass the Mic, Dynamic Voices for a Diverse Church.
Pass the Mic has been speaking directly to the core concerns of Black Christians for over a decade.
On our show, we've got interviews from theologians, historians, actors, activists, and so much more.
not to mention heartfelt, open dialogue on some of the heaviest issues facing the church in the United States.
Be sure to subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you there on the next Pass the Mic.